Perakim Chamishi, Shishi, and Shavi, right? The laws of misappropriation of Hegdish articles. We're going to start with the fifth chapter. The fifth chapter is all about details in Me'ilah, with what we are going to refer to as Koche Bedek Habayis, as we will explain. This chapter has 16 halachas. Says the Rambam, Echad Hamagdish LeBedek Habayis, whether someone consecrated for the temple upkeep, Dover Horoy Lechazek HaBedek, something that is could be used, something fit to be used for the improvement of the Beis Hamikdash, like a Evan, like a stone, which can mamish itself be used, a kodet or a beam. Or if someone consecrates for the Bedek Habayis, something that is fit to go on the altar. Now, even though this is something that should not be done, as we learned above, but this is what happened. For example, a person consecrated lambs or toidim, turtle doves. Oy hamagdish lamizbeach, davar haroy lebedek habayis, and that doesn't work lamizbeach because it's not fit to go on the altar. It's only fit to be used for temple upkeep, like an Evan or a koidom. Instance, what happens? The article has to be redeemed and sold. Now, since the person was magdishit lamizbeach, just to remember, the money that one will receive, that will be used to purchase animals. But this item itself is going to be sold. Whether it was lebedek habayis, whether it was lamizbeach, and again, the rule is going to be that these articles have to be redeemed and sold. And then, whatever the person consecrated this item for, the money should be used for that purpose. For example, if a person consecrated chickens, they're not fit to go on the mizbeach, and they're not needed for temple upkeep, or vinegar, or brine, or karka. We're going to see in halacha chamishi, in the fifth halacha about karka. Even if a person consecrated a garbage heap already filled with his manure, or afar dust, or aphid, or ash, in all of these cases, there isn't kedushas mizbeach, but there is kedushas bedek habayis. These articles, prior to being redeemed, are imbued with sanctity. Here is where we say that mo'alim bikulam, all of them are subject to the dinim of Me'ilah, Misha Shehugdishu, from when they were consecrated, Achi Yipadu, until you redeem, Dvarim Haroim Lipad, is that which is redeemable. Obviously, the Rambam is trying to say that if a person consecrates given animals for the Mizbeach, animals fit for the Mizbeach, they're not subject to the dinim of Me'ilah. That's a whole different category. These animals have to be offered. Halacha beis. Kol koche bedek habayis. Im devarim shemay alam lehem bikoche mizbeach, as we learned in the previous halacha, something that's not fit la mizbeach, even though you are magdish la mizbeach, and therefore also has to be redeemed, is subject to Me'ilah. Mitzdarfen zem zel Me'ilah, meaning that if a person benefited the minimum amount, which is only the amount of a pruta, but not only from koche bedek mizbeach, it's like part of a pruta from koche mizbeach, the other part from koche bedek habayis, the other part from koche mizbeach that's not fit to go on the mizbeach. Halacha gimel. Another detail, whether you are the one that ate yourself, or whether you gave it to your fellow, you were the ones that had hana, or you gave it affording benefit to your fellow, or if you ate and your chaved had hana, amazing, or the opposite, you gave and you had hana, if the sum total value, both of them together, is a pruta, we combine them. Kulam etztarfim leme'ilam. The im nasu min hakoil hana bepruta, that's another din, halacha dalet. That we allow for a person, even though he only had achila or hana of less than a pruta now, and a long time later, the person did another act of me'ilah, and now if you were to combine them, you would have a sum total of a pruta. We do combine them. God, it's amazing. In other words, you remained unaware that you derived benefit today. Didn't know that. When you become aware, I had that 10 years ago and some today, Well, halacha hey. Another rule, and we just mentioned this regarding karka. Ein me'ila, dinam of me'ila is only if something is detached from the ground. Aval, hanehena bekarka atzma. If you have hana either from the land itself or for anything that's currently attached to the ground, loimal. And that's true even if you damaged it. For example, if you plow the field that belongs to Hegdish, or if you plant in it, you are potter. Now the clod is detached, and you derived benefit from it, and you damage it by making it into crumbs. So the clod of worth, let's say, was worth a couple of prutas. Now that you had Hanon, by you having Hanon at that time, you somehow devalued it, then you're chayiv me'ila. It came from the ground, doesn't matter. You had me'ila when it was detached from the ground. Another case, hadosh b'stei hegdish. If you thresh on a stei hegdish, you're chayiv me'ila. Why? Because sheha'avik shalah, because the dust that detaches itself. I know that Rambam writes the words moya lasodeh. L'chayda, the Rambam means to say, even if this is the right version, girsa, it helps, it benefits the crops that you placed on this stei hegdish. So therefore, because you have hana'ah, it's from something that's attached. No, that you're having hana'ah from the dust. And that damages, because now the ground, the reason why you're plowing it is because you want for some dust to rise, which will benefit the grass that you placed there. And now you take the grass, Gavaldik, Ma'al. All right. If you're going to live in a cave that belongs to Hegdish, or if you live in the shadow, or if you have benefit from the shadow of a tree, or if you benefit or live in a chicken coop, because they're connected to the ground. If you consecrate a built house, whoever lives in the house is not going to be chayiv meila, because it's not a karka, but it's a mechuber lekarka. But if you consecrated items that are detached, even though now you built a house with them, nevertheless, if you live in this house, you will be chayiv meila, as we will explain. Gidulei hegdish. In other words, you have produce that grows in Hegdish property. The din is, Mo'alin Bahem, they're subject to Me'ila. Obviously, not when they are attached. But since they grew from Hegdish land, they are subject to the din of Me'ila. For example, Higdish saw them. So now that the field is consecrated, now after you consecrated it for Hitzia Asavim, it gave forth grass, Ilan Vasapedes, and you now detached it and used it. Mo'alin Bahem. Aval Hama, because it grew from Aval Hama but if you consecrated an empty pit and afterwards it got filled with water. Now the water did not come from Hegdish, the water came from elsewhere. Higdish Ashbam, but Nismales Zevel, but the Zevel did not come from the ground. Shoivach v'Nismala Yoinim, Hoyel ve'Einam Gedulim Hegdish, they came from the outside. Then if you have Hana from these items, even though that they found their home on Hegdish property, they're not Hegdish, and therefore ein mo'alin bahem. Or let me say like this: even if they are Hegdish, because Hegdish, you won't be chayiv me'ilah. Kein hazevel va'peresh b'chatzar Hegdish, waste or dung, that is now in chatzar Hegdish, loy nehen loy ma'alin. Like we mentioned, you can't have hana because it belongs to Hegdish. It's on their property, came from elsewhere, from Hefker, but there's no din me'ilah. So umaya asa bahem. Okay, it should be sold. V'yiplu d'meim la lishka. But no me'ila if someone inadvertently misappropriated. Mayan, another case. If you have a spring of water, that's emerging from a field of Hegdish, even though again, water that's in the field, that water belongs to Hegdish, but it's not Gidulei Hegdish. So you can't have Hana, but you're not going to be Chayiv Me'ila. And here it's even more. Once the waters leave the field, that water is taka everyone's. Another case, Arava, a willow tree that is growing stay Hegdish. Here you have an interesting halacha. This is Gedulei Hegdish, and therefore for sure loy nehenen, but there's no me'ilah, because since one willow has very little value, so we're going to have this a few times in the soon. something that is mamish, not valuable, is not going to be subject to me'ila, even though it belongs to hegdish. And of course, one lachatchila should not have any benefit from it. Ilan shel hedyet, if you have a tree belonging to a commoner, but it's near a field of hegdish, what will be the issue? The issue is whether we say that the roots, if the roots are going into the hegdish property, whether now it can also be considered geduli hegdish. And the roots of this tree is entering the shetach. It's under the property of hegdish. So listen to this. If your tree of the hedyet, which is outside the stay hegdish, is within 16 amas, and therefore what is this type of what's the 16 amas? If it's within 16 amas, guys, we consider that the roots are still part of the tree, and the tree is not from hegdish. The tree is not from hegdish. So it's, even though it's in the field, don't have hana, but hanahen loimal. But here's the key: if the tree is further than 16 amas, now we consider the roots like something separated from the tree. The tree is taken from hedyet. The roots are too far away. The roots are now b'stay hegdish. They're getting their nourishment from hegdish. Now that's called gedulei hegdish. And if you detach it, now the same rule, but in the opposite direction. If you have a tree that's growing in the property of hegdish, it's gedulei hegdish. And the Rambam paskins right halacha of that geduli hegdish moy alan behem here, but since it's near stay hedyet and some of the roots are going inside the stay of the hedyet, same logic. If it's within 16 amas, in other words, we consider the roots still part of the tree, even though it's growing with stay hedyet in a chulan property. If you detach those roots and had hana'a moyalan behem, because we consider it hegdish, even though it's coming from a tree of hegdish, and taka always loina henin, but if someone did so, they're not subject to the rules of me'ilah. Halacha 7. Cain, a nest that's biroi sha'ilan shel hegdish. That is, it was created by birds, and it's sitting on top of a tree belonging to hegdish. Shabana oisoi ha'oif, that a bird built me'etzim va'asava v'chayoytza bahem. I just want to say the rule. Our rule is that we presume that the twigs came from elsewhere, not from that tree. Kol hakein im habeitzim shaboy. Imay froich matzlicham leimay. Ein nehenen bohem because belongs to hegdish. But on the other hand, since halachically we don't say that the entirety of the nest was built from this tree, they brought it from twigs everywhere. So therefore, but now 1 second, if a person consecrates an entire forest. Now, my alin bekuloi, the isur of meila applies to all of its entirety. Bein beilanois here, bein bechol hakein sheberosh ilanos oishe beineim, because here we say that you're kidding. The whole forest belongs to hegdish. So all of the twigs, all of the materials that the birds took from the adjacent area to build the nest came from hegdish. Very good. Halacha 9. Gizbarim sheshafu atzi hegdish v'katzu oitzim. So the temple treasurers. Right, they cut down a tree and they made them into little pieces, usable pieces. So you're subject to meal, of course. It was atzei hegdish. But when you cut trees, you create some residue. Here again, we're going to learn about something that belongs to hegdish, but it's not chashuv. For example, sometimes you have little slivers. In other words, if you wanted to make 2x4s, sometimes you have to cut off little, to get it to that size, you got to cut off slivers of wood, or do you have nesoidus? You always have sawdust. So there's no me'ilah by the sawdust. Now, what does nevi of the wood means? It teaches the Rambam. Sometimes inside the wood is some round knot that looks like a wart. That's not usable. People don't want it. In other words, all of these entities that have very little value, here we go, that's a good picture, they are not subject to Me'ila, even though, as we learned, that karka itself is not included in the laws of Me'ilam. So since an Eved has a din of karka throughout, ein moyalan boy, and not only not in the Eved himself, not in the hair, even if the hair is so long that it's ready to be cut off. And in other areas of halach, something is about to be detached. It's considered detached, not over here, because number one, it's connected. And number two, unlike, let's say, produce, that when produce is ripe, it remaining on the land is detrimental to it. Hair, which adds value to a person, to a slave, the longer the hair, the more value he or she might have. So the longer you don't cut it off, the longer it might grow. So therefore, it's considered attached. Halacha Yudal. If you sowed produce, that was already hegdish. Remember, guys, we had this. If you are going to plant truma, what's the din of gedulei truma? Here, the same kind. You have something that's hegdish, should be sold. You planted it. So first of all, ideally, prior to them taking root, try to redeem them, which is the right thing to do. Now, if you did not redeem them, so the rule will be, don't forget that these seeds, they disintegrate. So, harei hagidulin archulin, the ein moyalin bohen, the ein mishalmin mehem kerem chodesh. If a person was chayiv because he did me'il on something else, here we say like this, that even though they are chulin, but the guy that planted that cave, what do you think? Let's say the seeds that he sowed was worth $100. Now that they took root, he owes the hegdish $100. So to use that which is in the ground already in root to pay for, you can't do that. Prior to paying for it, you can't pay from it a chiyuv that you have because you were moil in something else, the canon of the chaimish. And on the other hand, so how is it chulin? That whatever grows is chayiv challah. If it would be hegdish, anything that belongs to hegdish is not chayiv and challah. Here, don't forget, the land is not hegdish. It's not gedulei hegdish. The seeds were hegdish. You planted it in chulin ground. Once it grows, dinoi kechulin benegeya you're chayiv and challah. Halacha yud beis. Shmarim belongs to hegdish, to the Bedek HaBayis, and you put water on it, which is what they did after they extracted all the wine. They still made temed, and they would put more water, and they would get more and more this diluted water or this tinted water drink. So Rishon, Visheni, Vishlishi, wow, you're still asur le'ehanos boy. However, even in these three, Hanahena loimal, but Revi, not only is it loinahenen, but lachatchila muter. But if there was kachim mizbeach, in other words, the shemarim of yayin that were consecrated for the nesachim, here there's a higher level of kedusha. Here we say, the waters will always be asur to have anah, because it began from a kedusha chamura. Halacha yud gimel hamagdish tanagoylas lamizbeach. A person consecrated a chicken, a hen, a rooster to be put on the altar. And what's the din, guys? As we just mentioned quickly in the beginning of this chapter, the din is that they are not imbued with kedushas mizbeach. They have to be sold. Elamad, the money has to be used for something that's going to go on the mizbeach. And therefore, what did we learn in the beginning of this chapter? That if you magdish something la mizbeach that's not roy to go on the mizbeach, since it has to be redeemed, it has a din of bedek habayis, and it's subject to me'ilah. Moyalin bon, but not only in it, but also ubebeit sasa. That's the pshat. And similarly, higdish chamoy la mizbeach. So it has kedusha, which has to be redeemed to buy something that's going to go on the altar, and anything that has to be redeemed is subject to me'ilah. So now this chamoy, not only is it subject to me'ilah, but the milk is also subject to me'ilah. Higdish toirim lebedek habayis. Here it's the opposite. Something that is fitting on the altar. Really, something that's fitting on the altar should not be consecrated to the bedek habayis, but the person did so. Mayalin bahen also ubebeit seyem gemoy shebe'adnu in Pei Gimel. Halacha yudalit kosnois kona shabalu. The tunics that got worn out, and we already learned that they are going to be used to make wicks. Mayalin behem kishar kachim. But the nuance, here's the word, since kohanim are meant to wear them, even though you should not wear it shalei b'shas avodah, even though there was no shatnez, but it's temple property. But since it's made to be worn, there's no me'ila, even if someone did misappropriate it. Halacha tesvav, kaching goyim, im lebenek habayis ikdishu. Wow. Then just like if it came from a yid, lahavdil from a goy, moy alan bahen, abed, im kaching ben hamis beyachein, im me'ila min ha-Torah. Biblically, there's no me'ila. Why is not? Because since it says by karbanis, David al bnei Yisrael, and that teaches us that me'ila is only from karbanis of the bnei Yisrael. Nevertheless, also lohanas behem and divrei sefer. And the final halacha, which is mamash fascinating. Koil, sound. Mara and appearance in halacha have no substance. Even though we know there's waves and a chanami, but it's not mamash's dik. And therefore, anything that has no substance is not subject to me'ila. Now, reyach halachically does have substance, even though there's a machlokes, reicha milsahi, reicha lav milsahi. The Rambam will hold that when it comes to smelling, particularly when it came to the ketores that had an amazing smell, there's a rule by me'ila that once an item of hegdish was fully used for its mitzvah, post that it's not shaykh to have me'ila, which is normally what the case will be by the reyach. Oh, so koil umara v'reyach shel hegdish, even though lechatchila loy nehenim, for a person to go and to gaze, to see the beauty of the Beis Hamikdash, or to listen to the music that's being played, not l'shei mitzvah, but I want to have hana, is not something that you should do. On the other hand, there's no me'ila. And like we mentioned, koil umara, no me'ila, because there's no mamash's dik, there's no substance. Reyach, because the mitzvah was already done. However, one second, if the mitzvah was done, which means if you smell the scent of the ketores, after the cloud ascended, that's the mitzvah. But if a person smelled the ketores with the intent of having personal benefit while the cloud was going up, that's something there's mamash's dik there. It's something of substance, and the mitzvah was not fully done yet. So yes, then you'll be chayiv me'ila. Okay, what were you asking?
Like an etrog. I mean, reverse of that.
Esrog is not.
I mean,
an esrog is not hegdish.
Right. Okay. Got it. Sorry.
Okay. Now, Perek Shishi. We never yet defined. We spoke about the pruta. It has to be benefit of a pruta, but let's define better this hana'ah. And basically, the big din of this Perek will be the following: that if I benefit from something kevan that normally is not damageable. Remember these dinim we learned are so good in the Gemara, like a golden utensil. Gold doesn't get worn out. Gold doesn't corrode. There, all we need for me'ila is having hanava pruta. But other items like garments, of course, you cannot have hana'ah from a garment that belongs to the bedek habayis. But if you had hana'ah, if it did not devalue it a pruta, we don't only care about you having hana'ah bepruta, there also has to be the pigam of a pruta with many nuances. But basachas, as we'll see in this chapter, that will be one big din of this din. Always we're going to better define hana'ah, what type of hana'ah will create the isur of me'ila. And also, we will learn something amazing, that there will be times that once someone did me'ila, that item is no longer hegdish, mamish. And therefore, if someone else now uses it, that person sometimes won't be subject to me'ila anymore. There'll be other scenarios where just because one person had me'ila, the item is still holy, as we'll see. So you can have another person having another person have, and everyone will be chayiv me'ila, as we'll see in this chapter. This chapter has 13 halachas, beginning with halacha al. Says the Rambam, yesh dvarim sheha'adam nena behem, that when people benefit from it, v'lo yipagmu, they're ordinarily not going to lose their value. They're not going to get damaged. For example, if people use a clay zahav tahar, doesn't get used out, doesn't get used up. But there are other items physically, begashmias, that when you use them, normally there's a wear and tear. The wear and tear also devalues it. It's poigim. The word poigim is devalued. The word poigim is damaged. You get the idea. It loses its original value. For example, garments, klei chesed, they get worn out. Nechoishes, even metals. Now says the Rambam, and you almost like in parentheses, because we learned in the previous chapter that anything that's karka or mechubar karka is not subject to me'ila, even though you shouldn't have a no. So in the rule, if it's an item, like we said, that's ordinarily not damageable, all we care about is, did you have hana'ah that can be valued as a pruta? If the answer is yes, and you did so inadvertently, as we learned before, then you're chayiv, the keren, and the choimish, and the korban. But if you had hana'ah, you had on the value of a pruta. But it's an item that normally, when you use it, it becomes devalued. For example, you put on a beggar of Hegdish. We're not talking about big day kahuna. We already learned in the previous chapter that since big day kahuna were made for kahanim to have hana'ah from, they're not subject to the dinim of me'ilah. But the other begadim that someone was magdish lebedek habayis. Oy baka bakardoim, a person chopped with a consecrated axe. You're not allowed to do that for your own personal use. Even if you had hana'ah of a pruta, you're not chayiv me'ilah. Loy ma'al ache yivgoim by Hegdish b'shava pruta. But it has to be in that thing that you had benefit from. Then I'm going to give an example. Well, sometimes you can devalue a pruta, you can benefit from a pruta, but it's not in the same. The same item from which you had hana'ah, that item has to be devalued, at least a pruta each way, and it's also connected to your intent. Your kavana is leihanois. For example, we learned at the end of the previous chapter that koilu mare has no substance, that you're not it's not subject to me'ilah. But the Rambam wrote, but they don't have hana'ah. What do you don't have hana'ah? When you look in the Beis Hamikdash, you don't think you saw it's beautiful. When you heard the Levium singing, you didn't think it was amazing. You didn't have hana'ah. It's about kavana, and the pigam and the hana'ah has to happen ka'achas at the same time. Or, by the way, as we'll see, just to clarify, people have kashas on this ka'achas, because when you learn throughout this chapter, some of this might get sticky. The pshat is that the pigam causes hana'ah. The pigam has to be causing the hana'ah, even if it doesn't.
If you had hana'ah, there's no pigam, and it didn't devalue. Did you do anything wrong?
Yes, you did something wrong. Yes,
and
you will have to pay for the hana'ah.
Pay for it.
You have to pay. But the dinim that you have to add a fifth, and you have to bring a carbon, that's always, whenever we speak about don't derive benefit, but you're not chayiv me'ilah, the unique dinim of me'ilah is something that you're not subject to. Now, what happens if you had hana'ah only in the amount of a half a pruta, and you devalued it a half a pruta? Oy, shenehena b'shava pruta, upagem b'shava pruta, but it was b'davar ached. The Rambam will give examples for this, don't worry. V'loy nehena b'masha pagam, v'loy pagam b'masha nehena, arei ze loy mo'al. Ache yohane b'shava pruta, and the yifgoim, and the damage should be b'oysa hana'ah b'shava pruta b'davar atzmai. For example, let's go. There was someone consecrated, their old pants to the Bedek Habayis. There was a patch on it. The pants was worth $10, the patch is worth $1. The prut. Someone goes ahead. This is B'shoigig. The guy didn't know. He didn't know it belongs to Hegdish. He needed the patch. So what did he do? He removed the patch off a beggar of Hegdish and he put it on his pants. And he wore it. That's the key. In other words, he had hana'ah on the pruta. When I wear my pants that has a patch, what did my hana'ah come from? From the patch. Was the other Hegdish pants. I did not wear the Hegdish pants. The hifsid babeged, the damage, or the patch did not lose the value of a pruta. The pnei ahead of your hana'ah was from your chulin, from the patch. And the pagam was in the pants of the hegdish, not in the patch. Great example. Now, we did learn in the previous chapter, stop to remember that we do combine your hana'ah, the hana'ah of your friend, your hana'ah, the achil of your friend, vafilu l'zman beruba. So we're not going back on that at all. It's not related, even though one might have thought so. That Rambam has to point that out. But we're speaking about the hana and the pigam has to be the same thing. Halacha base. Koche, that are tamimim, that we already learned. Koche mizbeach. If you go ahead and you remove its wool, now, kiven shenehena bepruta, when you use this wool, listen to this, that this wool, once you detach it, Kavan, that's not going on the altar. Even though you did not devalue the animal. Now, why did you not evaluate? I'll tell you why. You did not. An animal that's going to be sold in the market has more value when it's filled with its own wool. But an animal that cannot be sold because it's going to go on the altar. Now, the question is why? We have to have both Hana and the Pigam? No, because in this case, the wool is like the golden cup. Anything that's ordinarily not damageable doesn't have to be Nifgam Bepruta for there to be Me'ila. That's the key here. So since the animal is worthy to go whether it has wool or not, so it's not subject to becoming damaged. Only Hana. But if the animal has a blemish, now the animal has to be sold. That's different. Everything changes. And shearing it makes this animal less valuable. Now you have to have. Now here you have to have also. One second. Exactly. Okay. If you detach the wool, you sheared the wool after the animal died. Here again, we don't care about pigam because of another klal. She'ein pigam lemesa. However, you should also remember, this is very important, guys. We learned this in the beginning of Perek Gimel, that koche mizbeach shemeitzu yatsu midei meila divrei Torah. So by the way, this meal is only midrabban. Meila is midrabban kosher biyah. Halachigim. Hamoyel bekoche berek habayis. Right, which is normally which is subject to meila. Even shemal bishgaga. Now comes the second topic of this chapter. Once you did meila, and we're speaking obviously about shoygig, that Rambam already paskened, right? By mezid, you're not chayiv the chaimish. By mezid, you're not chayiv the carbon. We're speaking about meila. Another thing happens that becomes deconsecrated. Now you owe the value and the fifth and the carbon. The item became deconsecrated. More details in a moment, and therefore there's a big nafkamina. The zesh. However, in contrast, if a person was ma'al bizadain, hoyel ve'enachayv b'karban me'ilah, therefore loynes chalal hakodesh. That's the system. That's the big klal. El harehu b'havayasi. It remains holy as it always was, and therefore the ba'acher the nenu b'bishgaga yes ma'al. This is going back to the first case of halacha gimel kodesh and transferred ownership. How do you transfer the ownership? Because either he sold it or he gave it as a gift, as we'll see many examples in a moment. So he's chayiv meila, but he did not transfer it to someone else, even though it was done b'shoygeg. Still, the second guy is meila. Yesh b'moyel acher moyel. This is going to play out. Don't worry. Many examples are coming. However, this rule that we just said, this is only shayich by an animal, as we will see, and the klei tashmish bilvad and utensils, but what not in food or in money. Food and money that are used are not here anymore. If they're not here, subject to me'ila after me'ila was done with it. Ketzad, for example. If a person shopped with an axe that belongs to Hegdish, and as we said, he had enough to devalue the axe, apruta, classic me'ila. Second guy did it, third guy did it. Here, we don't say, the first guy was moyel, yatsu l'chulin. It didn't. The axe belongs to Hegdish. It wasn't transferred. Kula ma'alu. But if the first guy took the axe and he gave it to his fellow, that act and he got money for it, or he got the hana of giving a gift. Humal, aval chaveiroi loy ma'al. Shasa b'koishol zav and hena b'prutam. Same concept. Here we don't even need pagam. But if not, the first guy, the second guy, whoever did it, even though that act is an act of me'ilah, but now that, like we said, it was b'shoigeg and it's no ilay ma'al. Another example. If he's riding on a donkey, classic, so now chayiv me'ilah. Because there wasn't a transfer of ownership. However, if the first guy or anyone, not knowing that it's hegdish chamoy, took this chamoy that belongs to the Barek Habayis, or it was mukdash lamesbeach, but you can't do anything with it other than selling it. So therefore, it's subject to me'ilah, as we learned in the beginning of Perek Chamishi. So listen to this, even if you only rented it out. So who, the first guy, the one who did it, is chayiv me'ilah. Another example. You lend out an axe. Lending it out. Lending it out was bechinam. Where's the hana? Yeah, because you have hana. Because if I lend you something, even though it's not tit for tat, but there's a certain type of, you owe me, and that has the value of a pruta. And that's worth a pruta. The guy that received it can lechatchila use it, because it's no longer a hegdish. And the same thing is if you lend out an animal, that's clear. However, halacha something that has to go on the mizbeach, in other words, it's imbued with kedushas haguf. It never loses its kedusha. Ain't okay? Ela yesh by moyel achamoyel al kopanim keitzad tolosh menachatos, as we learned before in halacha beis. Right. So if you have hana from the wool in halacha beis, you're chayiv me'ilah. Here, the same concept. And not only in this case, but even if someone gave this behemas kochin, lachaveiroi, kulam ma'alu. Wow. The Irali, shedin hamanachis, v'ha'oifes, ha'anesachim, u'klisharetz, kedin ha'behema, shekulam kedushas haguf hey. Now, lachavav, behemas kochin, shenafal behem mum. Now that it has a mum, now it has to be redeemed. Again, now it changes. Now it's Kakacha Berek Habayis. Now it only has Kedushas Damim. So now it changes. Now, if there was an act of Me'ilah with an action of transference, fits. Halacha Zayin. Amru Chacham. Shahanoit al-Even, if you take a stone or if you take a beam that belongs to Hegdish, and you give it to your fellow, the din is the halacha does not depart. The halacha here, the kedusha does not depart. That's what the chachamim say, and therefore even the second one is subject to me'ilah. Wow.
Why? Because it's a beam? I don't understand.
I think the difference is, first of all, that's only midrabanan, kevan. I think the difference is that, like the examples that Rambam gave before is by an axe. The axe is not going to be used in the temple. These are items that can be used in the temple, in the Beis HaMikdash. So it's closer to that which is going on the altar. Unlike other items that are only monetized by selling them. Here,
got it.
Now, if it came back, someone took it, but then they gave it back to the gizbar. Who ma'al, and the gizbar is not ma'al. In other words, when it goes back to the person the person who is overcharged of looking after it, now it's back where it belongs. Now, but The Rambam says, Kevan, here we go. Now, this is something that we find in Chazal. The Rambam was trying to make this fit into his rules. What did the Rambam give a rule? That when you do Me'ilah and you transfer it, then in the Schalal. So like you asked, so the Rambam is saying, no, it's not different. That this statement that we find in Chazal must be talking about that they did it bizadan. And only then when is Chalal HaKodesh. But if you did not do it bizadan, the Rambam understands these statements not to be an exception. Then the same rule will follow. That once there was Me'ilah and a transfer, this Chalal, and the second guy is not subject. And that next case. Anoitel Prutzu Shalagdish Al Dashahi Shaloi. A classical case. No, it was B'shoigig. You thought it's your money, but it's Hagdish money. So when are you chayiv on Me'ilah? But when you took it? No. Not when you took it. You're chayiv Me'ilah when you spent it. Or if you gift it. And as we mentioned, if you gift it to your friend, so the one who gave it is subject to Me'ilah. The friend is loimal. She'ein moil achar moil b'sharek deishus k'moishu b'yara. V'chein chol chayoytze bozeh. Now, not al even HaKodesh shel hekdesh. If you took a stone or a beam, let me add the words, even if you damaged it, but you didn't yet use it, that means you didn't yet benefit. Let's go back to the beginning of this chapter. Just taking it, even just damaging it, is not Me'ilah. Now, if I damage something of Hegdish Kev and I have to pay it back, I know I have to pay it back, but the dinim that I have to pay back, with the choybish, with the carbon, no. Loimal, sharei loinehen adayin. But if you built it into your house, that's called Hana. Now what happens if the son al gaba chaloin shematikra b'leichibra? You put it in your windowsill, you need it to close the window, it's somehow benefiting your house, but it's not yet affixed. So then we say you didn't, it's not called Hana yet. Loimal, yodur tachtel, until you push it, somehow make use of the space underneath it. And if you can somehow evaluate that now I had the Hana v'shava pruta.
Wait, but it's...
1 second. There is a certain benefit that you built it into your window. Since it's not affixed, the Rambam says that's called she'ein zu hana hanikeres. It's not something that's discernible.
But this time
no. Depends. No. The Rambam already said just taking it is nothing. Taking it, if I took it,
using it.
There's no me'ilah at all. I have to have hana. What does hana means in building material? That you built it into your house. What happens if you didn't build it in your house? You only placed it in your house. Without
you built it in your
house,
is it a one-time? If you built it into the house, is it a one-time hana or every day?
Yeah, now it's a one-time. The beam is worth today here in America $400. Once you have fixed it, you have to pay that plus a chodesh plus a card. Halacha. Not al pruta shel hegdish. If a person takes a pruta and they give it to a bath attendant. See, here it's different. Again, based on what we said before, we can say, well, you're only chayiv me'ilah when you take a bath. It's not true. If I have to pay to have the right to go into the spa, once I pay and I know that now I have a credit, that's hana. By the knowledge that whenever now I want to go for a bath, I got one bath day covered. And the same concept goes, this is all b'shoigig. That but there is an ummah, there's a professional, a shoemaker. And I have to every now and then give my shoes in. I have a dry cleaner. I gave him the $10, even though I didn't give in my shirts, my pants. Now I have a credit there. Right away, I'm all. Very good. But I didn't do Mashiach. Now, that's the whole word, that there's a difference in that at the end of the day, behilchos kinyanim, whether you're buying something from a goy or whether lahavdil you're buying it from a yid. By a goy, mois is koina. It's over. The transaction is final. By a yid, even though after mois is given yachai b'mishapara, if any of the sides retract, but the poil mamish, because of the chachamim, right? Shema nisr fuchitecha baliyah, that you have to do mashiach. So so then it depends. If it's from a goy, it's final. Now that you bought it, you're chayiv me'ilah. If it's from a yid, since it's not a done deal yet, you're not yet chayiv me'ilah. Halacha yud aleph hamoitzi mois hegdish. Mitzirachav, you spent it on your own needs because you thought it's chulin. Now the chiddush here is, you didn't do it to buy your groceries. You bought a carbon. You might have thought, since you bought something holy with it, at least you should not be subject to me'ilah. No, you in the chatas. I'm chayiv in the pesach. That's called me'ilah. Now comes another din. But I have to have hana'ah. When do I have hana'ah? Something that's brought like kapara, I will only have hana'ah by snikas adam. I want to make another statement. When we learned in the beginning of this chapter that you have to have hana'ah and the pigam has to happen at the same time. And we spoke out, not mamash at the same time, it's that the pigam and the hana'ah are linked. This causes that. That's one of the examples where we have to say so. Because the pigam is from when they shechted the animal. Lo asham, lachatas. But we're saying the hana'ah is only by zrikas adam. It's not at the same time, but you can only have zrikas adam because he did the shechita. That's the pshat. Now the Rambam is making a point with this kapara part. And therefore, if someone brings menachos, not for kapara, lechem toidim in a hegdish, for which you had to bring it from chulin, and you brought it from hegdish, just want to add a nuance that l'choira by when there's the haktara and the chanami, we're not speaking about a person who's bringing a mincha because there was some sort of sin, as we have some scenarios, right? By carbon oil v'chulei. We're speaking about a minchas nedava. Since there's no kapara, everyone has to give a half a shekel. Accidentally, you gave him a segdish. So like this, when are you subject to me'ilah? When you have hana. When do you have hana? So if you remember by Hilchos Shkolim, after the monies made their way to the Shkolim chamber, the kohen would go in there 3 times a year. Remember, with the 3 baskets, and he would go with no hems, and he would be talking the whole time, and he would do trumas halishka. So when the truma was taken, not only that, and the blood of the first communal animal was thrown, we're just being consistent with what we had on Halacha Yud Aleph. Ultimately, you only chayiv me'ilah when you have hana. You have hana when you have the kapara. The kapara comes with zrikas adam. Gave the pruta, he gave a half a shekel. And the kapara is worth $9. The kapara has no value, has infinite value. Now, Halacha Yud Gimel, they're different. A person designated the half a shekel. By mistake, instead of sending their half a shekel to the Beis Hamikdash, they went to the grocery store. So whether he or someone else spent it, that is an act of me'ilah. Now hold on. If a person gave to his chaved his half a shekel, you're going to Yerushalayim, give it for me. The chaver went to Yerushalayim and gave it to the Beis Hamikdash, but for the chaver. In other words, it's not that it wasn't used lechulin; it was used for the purpose.
But for himself, so he's still.
Like we explained. Now, once the money of the korbanis were already set aside, and we learned that when they set aside the money in the baskets, they say it's not only for the monies that are already here, it's also for the monies that are going to be given. Now, Mo'al HaShoikel, the Shliach, did me'ilah. Why? Hold on, Halka. Because since, like we just said, as we said in the Choshkala, and therefore, once the money was already removed over there in the Truma, so this money is mamish money of the Truma Salishka. And he used it for his half a shekel. So he's chayiv me'ilah. Like, who benefited? Ukeilu higia shekels el alishka. It's just like, Kevan, if money was already in the Trumas Halishka, money is already in there, classical. And God forbid, I go ahead, the shoygig somehow, God forbid, and I take it from me. I'm chayiv me'ilah. In other words, he didn't steal it from the Mishaleach. He stole it already from the temple. But if the Truma was not yet taken, so he didn't take it from the temple. Now, hold on. He's definitely chayiv to give that money back. he has to give the money back to the Mishaleach. He owes him that money, but he didn't do Me'ilah yet. Another thing, just like prior to the Truma being removed, it's not subject to Me'ilah. What happens at the end of the year? We learned this in Shkolim. And if there is money still in the chamber, so that money used for the Beis Hamikdash, if you remember, that money is to be used also for needs of Yerushalayim, to repair the walls, to repair the streets. Once it's not exclusive temple, it's also not subject to Me'ilah. Moving on to today's final chapter, today's third chapter. We're going to learn there is a big rule. It's called Ein Shliach Ledvar Aveiro. The rule is that if Reuven tells Shimon, steal from Chaim Yankel, and Shimon does the act of thievery, Shimon is responsible. Reuven is not a tzaddik, and Reuven should be punished. And if Reuven is causing for people to be ganovim, we have to deal with Reuven. But the act, the sin, is attributed to the one who did it, not to the one who sent him to do it. The big exception is Me'ilah. Not always, but sometimes. That if a person, Reuven, took money of Hegdish, B'shoigig, and he tells Shimon, do something with it. Shimon did exactly what he was told. Reuven is chayiv me'ilah. This chapter has 11 halachas, beginning with halacha aleph. Misha shogag, someone who b'shogeg inadvertently took either an item that is hegdish, that a kabayis, subject to me'ilah, or, excuse me, a person took money belonging to Hegdish. And it's not that the taker was the one that spent the money. No, but he asked someone else, go to the market. Here's the Gavaldic rule, that if the guy did as he was told, he did not deviate. Now we'll have nuances in that. Some deviations don't change the rule. Most of them will change this rule. But if he did what he was told to do, wow. That's the exception. Normally, ain't shliach ledvar aveda. Here, the shliach is not liable. The mishaleach is liable. But the imli also shlichusai. Elo asa shliach midas atzmai. That's already different. Now the shliach did meal. Now the shliach never knew it was hegdish. I know that. We're speaking about this. The whole meal is b'shoigig. For example, Balabai is shaman l'shluchai. There was meat. The meat already belonged to the Berek Habayis. The Balabais forgot. He confused it with another meat. And he tells a server, he tells a waiter, give it to the guest. But he gives to the guest meat. This waiter took bread also belonging to the temple. The shliach didn't know. But he did not give what he was told to give. Give bread, and the shliach gave the meat. Another example of the shliach not doing what he was told to do. There's money on the windowsill. Please bring money from there. And he brought money on the tower. In all of these cases, since the shliach did not do what he was told to do, now the shliach will be the one that's chayiv me'ilah. If the balabas tells him, go bring me this money over there in the windowsill, and the shliach brought it, even though the Mishalech says, no, I didn't mean, I really meant to bring money from the Migdal. Doesn't matter, the Shliach did what he was told. Even though the Balabas thought he asked him to do something else, that doesn't count. Balabai small, Sharei Asa Shlichus Ma'amarehi. The Shliach did what he was told to do. The Balabas had something else in mind, even though we believe him, he had something else in mind. Which means that they're not subject to the laws of shlichus. Nevertheless, if these people who don't have das did what they were asked to do, balabayis small. That if they deviated, the balabayis is pater, and guys, the shliach is also pater. We're speaking about a shliach that doesn't have das. I want to say something else. We learned in the previous chapter that once me'ilah happened with money and it was transferred, then the second guy is not going to be moyel. In this case, if the balabais is not moyel and the shliach who doesn't have das is not moyel, in this case, the next guy will be subject to me'ilah. Now, another nuance. Give my guests peace. He told him to give him a piece. One. The shliach went and told the guys on the table here, each one should take 2. He did not uproot what he was told. He did not deviate. He gave them the 1 plus another 1. That's different. Here we're going to say that the shliach is also exempt. Wow. We don't consider the second piece coming exclusively from the shliach over here. And why is that? Because he only added to the shlichus and he did not eradicate it. He did not uproot it. Ober, 1 second, Kevan, listen to the nuance. If the shliach tells them, take 2 and 2 on me, on my account, on my account. Now don't forget, the balabas told them to give them 1. And we say, yesh shliach ledvar aveda by meila. The balabais won't be off the hook. But here, both are going to be subject to meila. Shnei ma'alu. And now let's add another layer. Now, if the orchim go and they take 3, Gavaldik. Gavaldik's tragic. I'm just saying Gavaldik in the concept.
So
that everyone is mile.
Right.
And the hoiset midatoi. The nimsa chavere chayev. Lefi shenasu devarim v'lenekra shlichus. Who chayev al zeh hoiset midatoi. All of the above was only when if these pieces of meat were belonging to Kachir Berekabayis, but if the pieces of meat belongs to an Oila, then the whole thing is different. Who's Chayiv Me'ila? Only the one who ate. Now, why is that? Because here there's another Isur. What's the other Isur? The other Isur is you can't eat Kachin. And there's a rule that ain't shlich ledvar aveda. If one act happened that has in it 2 issues, if for one of them we apply the rule of ain't shlich ledvar aveda, then we invite it apply for all of it ain't shlich ledvar aveda. Since ain't shlich ledvar aveda, when is the exception? Only if there was only meila without another isur. But since here there's another isur, we go back to the rule. Amazing. Halacha gimel. All by accident. And va'amar, and the guy says, probably buy with this pruta, with half of it by nados. Nados refers to the land, to the keli. And with half of it by wicks. Now, holach vehevi bekula nados, or bekula psilos. See what happens. See here, the problem is that the whole thing is with the pruta. If he would have done half and half, as the balabas told him, then the balabas would be chayv meila because shlichus ledvar aveda. Here he deviated on half. Oy she'amar loy probably bekulanetis, oy bekula psilos, and the shliach went and he deviated, not completely, only in half, and he brought half natis and half psilos. Here, listen, chevra shneim turim. Of course, yesh shliach ledvar aveda. For the half that was done, theoretically, it's attributed to the mishalech, but that was only with half a pruta. Balabais lemol shereli nasa shlichusei bit pruta. Shliach lemol shereli akar shlichusei bit pruta. But in contrast, im amaloi probably bechetzion nadas. Mi makim ploini or bechetzion psilos makim ploini v'halach behavi nados v'makim psilos upsilos v'makim nados. In other words, it's amazing. It's not manomakim since he told him how and where to bring it from. If he deviated that part, that's called an akira. And he made an akira in both half and in the other half. That combines to one pruta. So now the shliach is mal. Mamish, amazing. Halacha dal. Nosan leishtei prutois. The mashaleach, the balabas gives the shliach 2 coins. For Amar loy, and he tells him havali yes. The heavy loy be pruta esreg be pruta nimoin. Guys, the shliach was mal. The balabais is completely potter. Why? Sharei shalachai liklas loy esreg. That's worth 2 prutas. And that was uprooted. Now, hold on. What happens if he got a good deal? What happens if he got an esrog that's worth 2 prutas? He only ended up paying a pruta. So the esrog part, shliach ledvar aveda by meila, is attributed to the mishaleh. The other pruta that belonged to Hegdish, the shliach didn't know. No one knew here. But he bought a riboin. The balabas never told him to buy a riboin. That's on the shliach. So now shnei ma'alu. Halacha hey. And the niskar chevra balabayis he hegdish koidem shetigel yad achenveni. So now he's no longer a shoigeg. Now it's different. The shliach is moel shu shoigeg or balabayis since kfar niskar is amazing. And the rule is, guys, going back to the beginning of the series, the ein amazing chayber korba meila. So since the balabas is out of the picture of meila, the shliach is the one that did it. That was what we learned in Pei Kalef. Now, let's go further. What happens if Niskar Afa Shliach, after he gave the money to the storekeeper? V'yada she hegdish. So if we remembered that before it came to the Chenveni, it means the Shliach gave it to him as a mezid. Shneim Petura Mekarba Me'ilah. The Chenveni didn't know that this is hegdish. He was not told that. Now, we learned in the previous chapter that Ein Me'ilah Achar Me'ilah, when there was a change of transfer, but here it was Bezodai. So now the Chenveni will be chayiv because he is the one that's the shroigig. It's mamash amazing. Now if they notified him, now he's also amazing. And let me go more than that. Now that this money is not going to go out l'chulin, 1 second, even though this money, there's no din me'ilah. If the Chenveni used that to buy something, you should know the nispas hamekach lehegdish, the article that's bought with hegdish money. Don't forget, this is hegdish money. The article becomes hegdish. That's great. Halacha, for example, the ketza yatsa kedei lahatzal lechenveni min achet. No, what happened there? Kevin, you hear what happened? I have a coin. By mistake. I already was magdish at Lebedek Habayis. I gave it to you. You gave it to a storekeeper. Today with communication, I says, "Oh my God, I gave you a coin of hegdish." You know, the Chenveni is not going to spend it. But 1 second, he has a cash register that has 50 coins. Now he knows one of the 50 belongs to hegdish. What should he do? But he can't use any of them. There's a solution. Simply. How much money did he get from me? He got $1. He has $300 bills. Let him take another dollar bill and make a declaration. Wherever the Bedek Habayis money is in this file should be transferred to this dollar bill. That's the solution. Or he can take a keli. So this item now, because you transfer kedusha when it's Bedek Habayis, and the yuta lechenveni l'yisham z'chol and Bechlal the Rambam writes, "V'chein pruta shel hegdish." Forget about the me'ilah. No one send it to anyone. I have in my house a pruta shel hegdish. I have in my house a big a box of coins, and somehow the hegdish money got mixed in there. Or worse, not worse. I'm saying another case. I had a big box of coins, and I said one coin from here is hegdish. No, which one? It doesn't matter. Now, what happens if I did not do that? And I begin spending the money? You cannot say that I'm chayiv me'ilah until I spent all of it. Because you don't have certainty until all the money was spent. Now, there is a rule that there is no me'ilah misafik. The problem with this rule is if that's the meaning of the end of halacha contradiction in the next halacha, and that's something that we don't have time. That's a big topic here. Now, halacha zayin. In other words, if we're going to understand the pshat that you're only chayiv me'ilah until you spent all of it because ein me'ilah misafik, now we'll have to figure out how to understand the next halacha. Halacha zayin. If a person says kis mi kis hegdish, a guy has many purses, and he says one of them is hegdish, or a guy has many oxen, he has cattle, shoyr mishvarei hegdish. Based on what the Rambam says, no, ma'alim bekulan ma'alim mixasan. Meaning, which means the Isra of Me'ilah applies to one of them and to all of them. The question is, why does it apply to one of them? That's the question. I'm just saying, I know this is a bigger issue over here. But it says, one pruta of this should be hegdish. Here, a guy saying, one ox from my oxen should be hegdish. It's mamash, it's a problem. It's a contradiction almost. So, Keitzad Oisa. Now, you see, before, at least let's go into the other part of Zion is easy to chab. A pruta is a pruta. So if I have a pruta in this pruta and say the pruta here should be deconsecrated on the fruit and you're good.
Does it have to look this?
No, because it has the same value. Many purses, one of them can have more money than the other. If I have many oxen, one can be more valuable than the other. So here, when I will deconsecrate one, so maybe Hagodol Shabbat, take the biggest purse, take the biggest ox, and say, if this is the one that's Hegdish, this is already the one that's Hegdish. Everything else is Chulin. If the Hegdish got caught on any other of the wallets or on the oxen, that should be redeemed on this, and you're covered because this has that value plus. And now you can have enough from all of the smaller ones. Halacha 8. If you did me'ilah, but less than a pruta, whether you did it b'zadin, whether you did it b'shgaga, as we learned above, taka, you're not chayiv the chaimish and the carbon, but mishalom esakenen. Shalom esakenen. If you were amazing. In other words, this din, which is that you have to pay back the keren, if I got to steal from you, cave, and less than a fruit, I don't have to pay you back. But by Hegdash, I do have to. But that's only b'shoigeg. B'mezid, for which normally you get mal. It's a little balabayis. If I entrust money, we're speaking about Hegdash money, to you, and you use it, you're not allowed to use it. Listen to this. Of shoyim it is that you're not allowed to use it. The Bala Pikadin, I shouldn't have given for you without telling you. I know that, but I never gave you permission to use it. If Kid and Eitzul, if you have to remember the dinam of Shemitah, if I ask a watch over my bundle of money and I did not bundle it in a way, there he can presume that I gave him permission, or to a historical type of knot, which indicates I don't want you to use it. And the din of a shomer is that you do have permission. Beautiful. So normally, what did we learn in this chapter? But I did not tell you to use it. So now, in Motziyam, both are exempt. With Rishos. Final halacha of this chapter, halacha Yud Aleph. We have a rule that the woman brings in, right? Let's say she got an inheritance after she got married. During the marriage, it's like Nechse Malug. Now, if it's Hegdish money, Umeis v'naflu hegdeshes b'Yerusha. So l'chsheyoytzi habal hamonis b'chafatzov. Then he's going to be chayiv me'ilah. In other words, what we're trying to say, that simply by the hegdish money being transferred to the ownership of the husband, that does not do me'ilah. He's only chayiv me'ilah when he uses the money. God willing to be